G'day guys, Viv here from Battle Bunker down in Melbourne. So now we've seen a little introduction to the game. Visit their website, get hold of the rulebook, get hold of some counters, some dice, a tape measure and a whiteboard marker, and we're pretty much ready to play. Just need some miniatures. Now like I said, you can proxy some miniatures in before you decide to go ahead and buy the excellent miniatures from Pulp Monsters to play Pulp City. Let's have a look at how the game actually starts. So to play a game of Pulp City, first we need to determine the encounter level. The encounter level is kind of like how big the game is going to be, 500 points, 1000 points, etc. Except with encounter levels, normally it ranges in very small numbers. A level 3 encounter, a level 5 encounter, all the way up in the game guide to a level 12 encounter. Now the encounter level you can choose between you and an opponent. Let's play a level 5 encounter, which is what you get in the starter set. The level 5 encounter and how you determine how many miniatures you have in a level 5 encounter is based on the Supreme's level. So for example, if we have a look at Nuke's card here, he's got a level 2. Here's a level 2 villain. Gorilla is a level 2 villain. So if I was going to play a level 5 encounter, then I'd have a look through my Supremes and say, yep, I'm going to field certainly Gorilla, he's got good firepower. Hellsmith is good for smashing, so that's level 2, that's level 4 levels, and I'll choose Gentleman because he's got his sniper rifle. So that's a level 5 encounter. I'll have 3 miniatures, or 3 Supremes at least, involved in the game. So the first step is determining the encounter level. Once we've determined the encounter's level, the next thing to determine is the resource points that we get to spend to bolster the team up, either with extra equipment, or we might take some minions. Minions are just random generic people like cops or sentry bots or those types of things, hired guns. So now that we've determined the encounter level, the next thing to determine is the resource points that we get to spend for our team to bolster it up with equipment, with minions, etc. They're called resources. The resource points that you have available in the team pool is basically the same as the encounter level. So if we're playing a level 5 encounter, we can choose up to 5 levels of resources. Different sorts of resources have different sorts of levels, like the Supremes that we saw earlier on. A Supreme can only use a resource up to its level. So for example, Gentleman, he's a level 1 like we spoke about before, so he can only use level 1 resources. Gorilla, on the other hand, he's a level 2 Supreme, so he can use up to level 2 resources. So in our resource pool for an encounter level 5, we can choose up to 5 levels of resources. Now the resources are all different. There's 3 types of resources, or 4 I suppose. One are minions, and they're represented on the resource card here by the little pawns up on the top right. On the top left of every resource card is whether the heroes faction can use it or the villains faction can use it, or both of them can. In this case, this one here for the hired guns, it's a minion resource and it can be used by both heroes and villains. It's a level 1 resource, as you can see just here. So if I was playing the villains, I could choose that as one of my resources. The Supremes also get access to their own exclusive resources. So for example, Hellsmith can use his hammers here, which has its own special ability that only Hellsmith can use or benefit from when he has this resource. So we determine the encounter level, then we determine the resources that we're going to choose for our team. So once we've determined our encounter level and chosen our resources, the game is pretty much ready to begin. The game is played over several game rounds. A game round will consist of several activations of your Supremes. I activate one miniature, then my opponent activates one miniature, I activate another miniature, he activates a miniature, etc. and we go back and forward until we reach the end of a game round. Now the end of a game round is concluded when I have no more Supremes that I can actually do anything with, or I've spent all my action points. So at the beginning of every game round, which I'll explain shortly, we have to accumulate or find out how many action points that we have to spend on our Supremes to do things during the game round. Setting up the miniatures is fairly straightforward. I place one Supreme, my opponent places one Supreme, I place another Supreme, etc. and go back and forward until all the Supremes are placed. Once the Supremes are placed, we place the minions, or the resources. If my Supreme has an exclusive minion, for example Red Riding Hoodoo has her wolf, when Red Riding Hoodoo is deployed, so is her wolf. So deploying the miniatures is fairly straightforward. It has to be within 8 inches of your table edge. As you can see here in the handy little game guide, the game sequence has 5 steps to it, so to speak. The first one is calculating how many action points you have in your pool. The next one is the effects phase, where anything that happened during the last game round that has a lingering influence happens at the beginning of the game round. Then we roll the starting roll. The starting roll is basically 1 dice for me, 1 dice for my opponent, so we both roll a dice, and then we add the mind characteristic from our highest supreme. So for example, Gorilla has a mind of 3. It's represented by the little brain. I'll talk about these stats that each of the miniatures has when we start to play a game. So I'd roll the dice and add Gorilla's mind of 3, here's my highest mind. Then the opponent would roll a dice and add their mind characteristic, and whoever won would go first in that round. Then we take turns, as I'll explain shortly. Then at the end of the game round, when both pools are dry, or when both players call the end of the game round. So the game rounds happen simultaneously. I activate one, he activates one, and it's based on the number of action points that I have to spend on my characters and how many characters I have things to do with. So it's a nice, fun, simple, quick game to play. When we come back in the next part, we'll actually start having a look at a game round and see how the sequence works. If you haven't checked out Pulp City already, go to their website. It's www.pulp-city.com. It's an awesome game. It's fun to play. You don't need hundreds of miniatures. The game mechanics are very good. The miniatures are enjoyable to paint. This game gets 2 thumbs up from me.